Thanks for having your camera off, Dalal. And Aisha, nice to see your beautiful faces at the end of the
Oh,
day.
it is. It's lovely to see faces.
Hi, Juliet.
Anyone feeling brave speaking in front of this mad English woman to all her colleagues?
Don't call me that. Hello and welcome to this week's second webinar. Our last webinar on Tuesday was around the new regulation for prevention and support for teachers in combating drugs and tolerance in the UAE. And this session, thank you very much for joining us. Please make sure that your microphones are muted. We have no planned fire evacuations. I hope you don't either. And we have no interruptions expected. I am delighted today to welcome back today's speaker, Jill Clark from the company Elklan. Please be reminded that we are not on commission for any of the people that we work with, and we genuinely believe in Elklan's training, and we value the partnership that we have with them, and we have evidenced improvement of the support that they give to our students and the improvements made. Today's webinar is called The Link Between Language and Behaviour, and it does follow on from last month's webinar, which you can catch on our YouTube channel called Developmental Language Disorder. So please do subscribe. A video of this one will be uploaded as well, as along with all of our other webinars. So subscribe so that you keep up to date with all the things that we've got going on. If you know anything about me or follow my work, you will know that the phrase behaviour is communication is never very far from my lips. This is learned from experience, but also from theorists and some research that I've read and I've worked with and I've studied, such as Bandura's social learning theory, Skinner's behaviorism, Vygotsky's social interactive vision. I can't say that word, I'm moving on. And more recently, theorists such as Delahook, Perry, or Porges on their polyvagal work. Really interesting research still coming through in very up-to-date ways. If through the webinar you would like to add any questions into the chat, please do so, because we will answer these at the end of the session. And without further ado, I would love to welcome Jill to the stage, to the platform. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's
Not a
really
problem at
good to
all.
be. It's really good to be here again. As you know, if you were at the last session, language and supporting children and young people who have speech, language, and communication needs is my passion. So I'm here today to talk to you about language and behaviour. So as Louisa said, feel free to chip in any comments in the chat. I don't mind being uninterrupted. So if you've got a really burning issue that won't wait to the end, please do ask. I don't mind at all. But there will be specific time for questions at the end. So today we are going to be talking about language and behaviour. I am not a behaviourist. I'm not a specialist in supporting children with behaviour, but I am a specialist in language. And what I see from my work, my everyday work, is that children who have speech, language, and communication needs may well have behaviours that are concerning. Alongside that, now this session is not about managing behaviour. As I said, I am no expert in that area. There are plenty out there, but it's not me. But what we're going to think about today is recognizing when a behavior may be due to an underlying speech, language, and communication need. And what I can support you with is around identifying that need, supporting that need, and hopefully, once that support's in place for a child's language, it will reduce those behaviors of concern if the language is what is causing those. So let me see if I can get my slides to move on. There we go. So this is what we're going to talk about in today's session. We're going to consider how to identify which children and young people might have speech, language, and communication needs, and how this might be linked to their behaviour. And then we're going to explore a range of different strategies that we can use to support these children and young people. So I really like this quote. It's from a speech and language therapist in the UK called Libby Hill. I don't know if you get on sort of UK TV out there, but there was a program called Born Naughty around children with autism. Libby Hill was the speech and language therapy advisor on that show, so she's fairly well known in the UK. This quote from her I really like. It says, "A child or young person's behaviour is telling us something. We need to look at the causes, not reach straight for the consequences. Children and young people who need the most help ask for it in the least helpful ways." I really like that. I think that's a great introduction to today's session. So the behaviour concerns around children with speech, language and communication needs may be them telling us in the least helpful way that they need support and that they're struggling. So that's what we're going to cover and explore a little bit today. So the outcomes for children with speech, language and communication needs, we know that children with SLCN have less favourable outcomes than children who don't. And these children are often facing lifelong challenges. As we discussed at the last session around developmental language disorder, that is a lifelong condition that is not going to go away. So these children and young people are facing lifelong challenges, and these challenges extend beyond the classroom. They affect a child's behaviour, their academic achievement, and their future socioeconomic outcomes too. So for educational outcomes, this is obviously based on UK data, but I'm sure you'll have very similar data in Dubai. But language needs are one of the strongest predictors of low academic attainment. And children and young people with speech, language and communication needs are more likely to fall behind in their language and their literacy and their numeracy development. They're more likely to be identified with additional learning needs, and they're more likely to struggle with classroom engagement and their comprehension. So that's from Maggie Snowling and her team. And then a national study by James Law and his colleagues found that speech, language and communication needs in early childhood was a predictor of persistent low attainment at the age 11 and beyond, especially in reading and writing. So that's our educational outcomes. If we look further ahead and we consider employment and income, SLCN can have long-term effects on employability. And language needs in childhood are associated with lower rates of post-secondary qualifications. So those children and young people that go on to higher education, much reduced number of children go on to do that. There's a reduced access to skilled employment and an increased risk of long-term unemployment. And there's also a very strong evidence, of a link between speech, language and communication needs and behaviour and SEMH, so social, emotional and mental health. So poor communication and ineffective acquisition of language are associated with behaviour problems, which in turn link to worse outcomes throughout life. So is it just a coincidence that there's such a strong correlation between language and behaviour? Or is there a causal effect here? And if so, which one leads to the other? So is it language that leads to poor behaviour? Is it poor behaviour that leads to language needs? Which way round is it? And I would suggest that it's your speech, language and communication needs that are resulting in behaviours of concern in these children and young people. So for behavioural outcomes, we've looked at educational outcomes, we've looked at employment and financial outcomes, but looking at behavioural outcomes, there is a very strong risk of children and young people with SLCN for developing behaviour and mental health needs, such as aggression, hyperactivity. And studies show that these behaviours often stem from frustration with communication and emotional dysregulation. So that frustration at being able to not to communicate effectively, coupled with being dysregulated emotionally, has a significant impact on a child's behaviour. And in the UK, up to 81% of children and young people in alternative provisions, we call them PRUs here, so pupil referral units, but specialist units for children and young people who are struggling to remain in mainstream education. So around 81% of those children and young people have undiagnosed speech, language, and communication needs. So these children and young people are ended up in specialist provision for their behaviour, and then people start looking at what the underlying cause could be. For 81% of those children, they've got speech, language, and communication needs that have never been identified or suspected. So in the UK, we have the Youth Justice Service. So that's a service aimed at young people between the age of 10 to 17. They work with young people who've either committed or are at risk of committing criminal offences. And there's lots of data telling us that around 60% of those young people have undiagnosed speech, language, and communication needs. And actually, it could be as high as 88 to 90%. So these findings are highlighting a critical gap in that early identification and support for speech, language, and communication needs. And that behaviour of many young offenders may have roots in undiagnosed communication needs. So it's so vital that these children are identified early and the support is put in place early to mitigate against those potential later concerns around their behaviour. So we've got, it's important that we get it right for these children. I've obviously Louise has read my slides because she pinched my phrase, but all behaviour is communication. We might hear that said a lot. Do we agree with that? Do we, can you think of any examples? Or maybe a situation where your behaviour has communicated how you felt and how that behaviour might have been perceived by other people. So everyone communicates through their behaviour. For example, a baby cries when it's hungry or when it's wet. And an adult might yawn if they're a bit bored at work. So I'm going to say the word yawn and you're all going to yawn now. So we are all communicating through our behaviour without even realising it. And sometimes that might be more apparent through our body language, our facial expression, our tone of voice, the words that we use. All of that can communicate how we feel, and that behaviour is then perceived by others. So we might be perceived as a bit rude, a bit quite angry, people might be a bit insulted by things that we say or how we respond. So our behaviour is always we're always communicating our behaviour. So thinking about children in the classroom and just have a moment just to reflect on the children that you're working with. What kind of behaviours of concern do you see in the classroom? So it may be defiance, and maybe not doing what they're asked. It may be answering back. It may be walking out. There's lots of different behaviours that you might see in your classrooms. And important here to identify a behaviour and not the emotion that's linked to that. So you might think, well, frustration, but what does frustration look like? Frustration might look like, pushing things away, having a meltdown, arguing with somebody, all of those different aspects. So just think about the children that you're working with or the young people and think about the behaviours that you might see. But also think about the way that these children and young people might be labelled. These are all things that I have heard about children that I support. They're just so naughty. They're so attention seeking. They're very willful. They choose not to respond. I have a personal bugbear with children that are described as choosing not to respond. Manipulative. Oh, it's poor parenting. They're disruptive. They're lazy. They don't even try. Their family are not supportive. They're dishonest. They're aggressive. They're short-tempered. They just don't listen. They won't engage. They refuse to cooperate. We're thinking about children with speech, language, and communication needs. Are these labels fair? And are they helpful? And I would say, and hope you would say the same, that absolutely not, absolutely not. And sometimes these labels are actually used in front of children. So children are hearing these labels used about them. And I think it's really easy to jump to conclusions about children and young people with behaviour needs that are, as a result of speech, language, and communication. But we don't always recognise that link between how a child's speech, language, and communication needs can affect their behaviour. And at other times we do recognise. So, a child can't make themselves understood, so they get really frustrated. But actually, do we know what to do about that? And do we know how to support that child? And hopefully from today, you'll get some ideas.
We've
So
had
let's flip.
we've had a couple of comments in the
Oh, yeah. Okay.
chat,
Sorry, I can't see the
but
comments.
no, it's okay. Violence towards other students,
Okay.
but also self-harming, biting or banging
Yeah.
their own head, especially
Yeah.
around our children with communication challenges like autism. And it's funny that you said like there's different things on there that become bugbears for us. So
Yeah.
attention seeking is the one that always gets me. If they need
Oh,
your
yeah.
attention, then they need your attention. It's not that they're choosing. It's that it's people think that people have a choice of these things. They don't have the choice. They're not willfully doing it, right?
Yes. Yes. And I think if you turn doesn't or won't into can't, it really helps you sort of reflect on that. So instead of doesn't engage, can't engage, doesn't listen, can't listen, refuses to cooperate, can't cooperate. And as soon as we turn that doesn't or won't into a can't, it gives us a little bit of insight into what's going on there. So yeah, really, really helpful points. Thank you. So, how about if we flip those comments onto, thinking about those behaviors that you might see? What about if they can't follow instructions? What about if they're really struggling to follow instructions, but it looks like they're choosing not to do what they're asked? What about if they struggle with that cause and effect? Lots of children and young people with speech, language, and communication needs struggle with cause and effect. So, things, if I do this, then that might happen. If the result of my actions might cause this. Really tricky for lots of children and young people. Can't pick up social clues from other people. So they might respond in a way that seems appropriate because they've completely misread that situation. And therefore, their response appears rude, appears arrogant, appears inappropriate. Memory differences. What about if we're giving children instructions, but actually they can't remember that information and therefore they're not following our instructions, not because they're choosing not to, but because they can't remember it. What about if they find it hard to generalize from one situation to another? So they learn something in one situation and we go, you know how to do that, but they can't generalize that into different situations because that's a really tricky skill for them. So yeah, I can do that here, but I don't know how to do it here and here and here. So that generalization. What about if they struggle to organize themselves? Really tricky for children with speech, language, and communication. What about if they've got problems with sequencing? Things come out in a muddled order, they can't get things in the right way. Retelling a narrative, talking about what's happened. What happened in the playground that led to you pushing, the other child and knocking him over, that retelling of that event. And actually, they might miss out the fact that that other child was really quite unkind and mean to them, and nobody saw that. So that ability to retell what's happened, really tricky for lots of children with speech, language, and communication needs. What about if they've got sensory overload? So they experience sensory stimuli more intensively than other children, and therefore they get overwhelmed and they become dysregulated. What about if they struggle with the concepts of time? So they're confused by words like now, soon, later, before, after, and get things in the wrong order because of those time concepts. We've already talked about difficulty with narrative. And this one, for me, this last one's really important point to note. They are exhausted and frustrated potentially from the stress of trying to keep up. So they are absorbed in an environment where language is the main medium of teaching. and conversation and learning and interacting. And yet that's tricky for them. And therefore it becomes overwhelming. They become exhausted and they can become frustrated and they can just switch down, shut down as a method of self-preservation, I think. So though, that opting out and disengaging may just be because I'm just so exhausted from trying to keep up. I can't keep doing that anymore. So we're going to look at speech, language and communication needs in a little bit more detail from here. I'm hoping that set the scene and given you some information. Sorry, I'm just going to keep my eye on the time as well. So we're going to think about speech, language and communication needs and where that all fits in before we start to think about, well, how can we support these children? So around 10% of children and young people have speech, language and communication needs. So if you've got a class of 30 children, you're looking at about 3 children in that class. So that's what's depicted in that visual, that image that's on your screen. There's 30 little people there, 3 of whom have speech, language and communication needs. What does that look like in these children? So it may be that they use shorter sentences, shorter phrases. It may be that they're not understanding what you say or what you've asked them to do. It may be that they say less, and what they do say is less complex. And it may be that they just don't understand context. So they don't understand language in the bigger picture of what's going on. So have a little think. How might that be evident in how they behave? It may be that if they're not understanding what to do, they either do the wrong thing, they don't do anything, they talk to the person next to them going, what have we got to do? I don't get it. And then they get in trouble for talking. So it may be that they switch off and become a little bit defiant, like, oh, this is stupid, I can't do this. I'm a little bit like that. If someone gives me something that I find quite tricky to do, give me some, I don't know, IKEA flat pack furniture that needs assembling and I'm struggling to follow the instructions, I'm very much, well, this is ridiculous. How am I supposed to do this? So you can get those kind of behaviours in children as well. What about using language in social situations? Lots of children with speech, language and communication needs really struggle with this. So getting jokes, understanding that word play, idioms, sarcasm. Once you're working with children that are 8, 9, 10 and up, they really use sarcasm for humour. Teachers use sarcasm for humour. Children often don't understand that. They'll take it very literally. And that can result in laughter from other children. You get a child. I'm trying to think of a child that I worked with this week where I was just observing a class and a teacher said, right, everybody, jump up. And the child stood up, they jumped, and then they sat back down again on their chair. And everybody in the class laughed at this child because they didn't understand that jump up meant, right, everyone, get up, we're going out. They were, moving to playtime. So sometimes that can have a knock-on from other children's response to it, but sometimes it can get them into trouble as well. Keeping up with that social banter, especially for anyone that's working with secondary age children in the UK, so sort of 11 and up, lots of social banter going on, lots of phrases that are in with that crowd at the moment, keeping up with that social language. I struggle with that as a parent. I don't know if anyone here struggles to keep up with that social banter of language that children are using these days. But keeping up with that really, really tricky, can become quite socially isolating. Also, for that age of children, a lot of that banter is through social media, WhatsApp, whatever it might be, that jokey. And if you lose the context as well, really could be quite tricky for them to understand. And massive issues with friendships as a result of that. We talked about using narrative to organise experiences into a logical, coherent story to share with their communication partners, but also in their learning, and that understanding and observing patterns of communication. So the subtle side of conversation, like how to change a topic, how to end a conversation, how to spot when your conversation's gone wrong and repair that misunderstanding, how to start a conversation. So lots of those skills can be really tricky for children with speech, language, and communication needs, and again can maybe impact on how they behave. And if you've got a child that's socially quite isolated, I've worked with children that become like that, and they end up becoming a bit of a class clown. So they end up trying to make children laugh to like them because they want to get that, that engagement from other children, but maybe do it in the wrong way and then get in trouble for doing that as well. So sometimes really quite vulnerable children. Literal thinking. We talked about using clues from the context. That's really important for understanding inference as well. So children with speech, language, and communication needs might really struggle to pick up on inference and understand what was actually meant rather than what was really said. I had a lovely example of a young person who was, I think he was 13 at the time, and he'd been to the dentist. So he was late arriving at school, late going into a lesson, and the teacher didn't know that he'd been to the dentist and said to this child, "What time do you call this?" And the child looked at his watch and said, "It's 9:15." And he was in trouble for being rude to the teacher. Actually, he didn't understand that what the teacher meant was, "Why are you late?" Because what the teacher had said is, "What time is it?" Which the child answered. So, sometimes they get in trouble for coming across as rude or inappropriate or answering back because they've just not understood what actually the words meant, what the context meant rather than just the words. So think of things that you might use in your classrooms, like there won't be enough time today for you to start this new document on your project. What that really means is start saving your work and close your computer. But that's not what was said. So the child might then not do what the teacher meant and then get in trouble for not doing that. So again, thinking about how might that be evident in how a child or young person behaves. Massive impact on their reading, their spelling, their written expression. If a child can't say it, they won't be able to write it. So it may be that a child set off on a task and actually when the teacher comes back to them, they've done very little or not done the expected work, actually doing it completely wrong, can't do it. That working memory, holding that information so that it can be worked on to learn new information or solve problems, all that memory side of things. And they also might be really easily distracted by other people talking or noise. So children that, there's a different group of children in the classroom who are talking together about a project that they're working on, and the child is so distracted by that it is a barrier to them completing their own work. So again, thinking how that might be evident in the classroom.
I love what you said there, Jill, about if they can't say it, they won't be able to write it. I know quite a few children who can express their vile language in writing when they might not be able to tell us where to go. I've seen that quite a lot.
Yeah, sometimes you do get that, don't you?
But again, that's the communication. That's their form of communication, how they're feeling and the underlying challenges, right?
Yes. And also it comes into that knowledge of who it's, actually I can say that to my peer, but I shouldn't say that to my teacher.
Yeah.
And that knowledge of who I can say things to, so subtle. And no one teaches children these skills explicitly. Right. They're all learned through experience. So sometimes children do say things that are, that they wouldn't say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But one person in the chat has put, well, actually, sometimes they remain silent. So sometimes it's like not even expressing it verbally or in writing, but being completely silent is also,
And those are the children that can also get missed really easily because, we're thinking here about sort of outward behaviour that's difficult to manage potentially. But another behaviour is a child withdrawing, becoming quiet and not doing anything. And then you collect the books and you realise, you've not done anything here. What's going on? Why haven't you done this? And they're just not understood. So
but if they're behaving, if their behaviours are okay, they are often completely missed.
Yeah.
surprisingly to anybody that knows me, I was that child, the quiet
Were
one.
you?
I didn't speak. I just sat in the class, chewed my pencil, nodded occasionally, yeah, and just didn't communicate at all. So yeah, it's an
Yeah.
interesting thing, very interesting.
It is. It really is. And
Especially
that's
our good
why
girls, because some of it's gender stereotype as well,
I
right?
do think it is girls, though. I think there are a lot of girls that do get missed. And we know that girls are a group that are underdiagnosed for ADHD because they're often inattentive rather than the hyperactive ADHD. So often missed for that, often missed for autism, often missed for speech, language, and communication needs. So although there is, we feel like we might be gender stereotyping here, actually the evidence tells us that that is what is
Agree.
happening, and these young people and children are being missed. And if they're being missed, then that long-term impact for their mental health is huge because that we can't support them with their confidence and their self-esteem and their resilience if we don't know that's what they're struggling with and they're not being identified. So important that we're aware of these children. So your children with speech, language, and communication needs will need more repetitions for mastery to reflect that underlying processing needs. So thinking about your vocabulary, a child who does not have speech, language, and communication needs around 10 exposures to a word in order to understand and use that word. For a child with SLCN, it's 30. So those children need 3 times as much exposure to new vocabulary in order to learn and remember it. So they need many more repetitions for that mastery and to reflect their underlying language and communication needs. They're also going to need support with their emotional regulation. And if you think about how we use language to support our emotional regulation. So if you've had a really bad day at work, you may well go home and you will go, well, you can't believe what happened today. Can you? And you'll have a good old witter about what went on. You're using your language there to regulate your emotions. You're talking through what happened, hopefully finding a resolution, and maybe someone's reassuring you of like, oh, don't worry, we all have bad days. So that emotional regulation comes through language. If children have not got the language to regulate their emotions, they might be doing that in a different way and a way that's not helpful for them or for us. So just to be aware of that self-regulation, such an important area. Okay, I have put a little case study here of a young child called Alex. This is, although it's not a real child, Alex is based on a child that I've worked with, but he might sound very familiar to all of you. So Alex is 9. His mum is struggling to get him to school every day. And when he does get there, he's often late because it's getting that organisation in the morning to get out the house. And when he does get there, he's often forgotten something like his lunch, his PE kit. Today is Wednesday, and that means literacy first. Alex sits at his desk, and as the teacher starts to introduce the lesson, she spots that Alex is swinging back and forth on his chair. So she points to the classroom rules poster that's stuck to his table, and she addresses him in front of the whole class, telling him to stop fidgeting and focus. Alex finds it really hard to sit still, and he starts to pick at the edges of the poster while he's trying to work out what the word focus means because he doesn't know. But before he knows it, the teacher's finished speaking and has started to hand out worksheets. He looks around the room anxiously at his peers who are picking up their pens to write, and that usual wave of anxiety creeps over him. What was it that he needed to do? He looks at the instructions on the sheet, but the words are too long and he can't make sense of them, and all the other children are starting to look at him. He picks up the poster again, but this time more vigorously. The teacher walks over to him and asks if he knows what to do. Yes, he replies. So the teacher says, explain it to me. And Alex mumbles, shut up, I don't care. And the teacher responds, excuse me, look at me when you're speaking. At this point, Alex kicks out his chair, rips up the worksheet and yells, shut up and leave me alone. And he's ordered out of the classroom. Once out there, he calms down and he starts to process what has happened. Okay, so that is a case study of a little boy called Alex. What we're going to do here is hopefully this is going to work and you're going to go into breakout rooms, smaller rooms. this is where it'd be great for you to turn off your cameras so that you can see the people that are in your room with you. And what I would like you to do with that little case study of Alex is think, what behaviours are there? So what are the behaviours that are concerning about what Alex is doing? So swinging on his chair, being rude to the teacher. So note those and think about Alex and what could be causing those behaviours from his speech language and his communication. Okay.
How long would
So
you like them to have, Miss?
can we have just 5 minutes? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely, no problem at all. So we're going to assign you out into 3 rooms. And then once you're there, if you feel able to, please put on your camera and have a chat. And give the question again, please, Miss.
So what behaviours are concerning and what could be causing them from a speech language and communication need? Are we able to screen share that case study into the breakout rooms? I'm not used to
say, if you want to take a photograph of the
good idea.
Before you go, feel free to take a photograph of the slide and then have a chat amongst yourselves, okay? And I'm going to push you into rooms now, hopefully, if it works. Let's go.
So the first question was, what behaviours are noted and then what could be causing them?
Okay,
so
let's go with the cause. Let's go with the cause because I think we're all...
Yeah.
Juliet, what do you think could be causing the child's behaviours?
First and foremost, he's not able to follow the instructions because, as we've already seen, he's got this language barrier.
Yeah.
He's not able to understand. So obviously his processing is taking some time, and he is like, and he looks all around and everyone seems to know everything. So that's where he sits and he nods and he says, yes, even I understand, because he doesn't want to be out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's it. And then and then he's not ready for the task. So when the task is given, that's where, he reacts. So he communicates through his reaction.
Yeah.
Which probably is not acceptable.
Yeah. And it's not an acceptable reaction, is it? It's absolutely not. But once you start to unpick what could be going on for him, it just gives us that little bit more understanding of those behaviours rather than going straight for the behaviours.
Exactly.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, I was
Yeah.
just going to say, if I can just, it's just the
please
last
do.
line. Sorry, the last line that you have in the case study, that really got me thinking, because he said once outside, he calms down and begins to process what just happened.
Yeah.
That's telling me as well that, other than the language, it could be something up there that's, he can't understand it fast enough. Either maybe the teacher's talking too fast or the instructions are too many. And so that last line is telling me he's beginning to process what just happened. So it's taken him that long instead of being in that situation and then beginning to process. But at the end is when he really starts, and that should show the level of difficulty for him anyways.
Yeah. And that's going to have an impact on his self-esteem and his view of himself. So if you talk to students with speech, language and communication needs, they will, and this is backed up by evidence, there's research to show this, but they perceive themselves as less popular, less liked, less clever. And so that kind of process that goes through the head is, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I've done this again. I always do this. It's all my fault. Now everybody, so you get into that negative cycle as well, which then destroys that child's self-esteem, which reduces their resilience to cope with that in the future. And you just end up with this situation that just goes around in circles for this child. Unless you break that cycle, it's just going to keep happening. Okay.
Maybe, sorry, if I can add one more point.
Please.
I was just having a chat with my other colleagues in the chat room. It's he came late, so he was already worked up. And when he entered the classroom and the teacher started, she pointed him out in front of all the classroom when she said, pay attention and stop fidgeting, which brings unwanted attention to him. That also adds to the previous points where Aisha and yourself mentioned, affecting his self-esteem even more. So it's been building up.
Yeah.
He's late, he's missing part of the introduction to the lesson. And when he starts to be part of the classroom, he's being pointed out. So it's all building up, which added to his overload.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just layer upon layer, isn't it, of things going wrong, being singled out, not understanding, not knowing what that word meant, meaning I've missed big chunk of the instruction. Now I don't know what to do. Everyone else knows what to do. I'm not clever because they all understand and getting on with it, and I can't. So my defense reaction is to opt out, mess about, and that comes out as, I mean, we're all capable of saying things we don't mean in the heat of the moment, aren't we? We're so capable of doing that. And yet we're so intolerant of when children do that as well. It's not acceptable when children do that, even though we might bite someone's head off and snap at them because we've had a bad day. But, so it's all those, really, thank you so much for all your contributions there.
Thelma, I don't know if you want to take your mic off and say what you wrote in the chat, but I think it's also very important. And Thelma says, I think the frustration of not being able to respond as expected got him anxious, and unfortunately that then caused the reaction. Probably he hasn't found a better way to react at this time, because he's also young, and young children need to learn these skills. Thanks.
Yeah.
If I may add something.
Yeah.
A lot of the time we see in the EL students that they used to be high performers in previous schools in their own mother tongue language, and then when they come to our school or to a different language school, then they start sort of performing low because of the language barrier, and that basically leads to a lot of frustration as well. So like Jill said, the self-esteem is affected, all of these things are affected, and like everyone participated, it is putting them in a situation which could definitely lead to such behavior and frustration, a big huge frustration that builds up. A lot of the time also they start assuming that, okay, saying to the parents that, oh, my stomach hurts, I don't want to go to school, like all of these physical sort of things that they assume that something's wrong with their body and they don't want to go to school for those reasons.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. That physical manifestation of anxiety in children, because school is a tricky place for them, and it can be, yeah. So I think the thing that's coming out of the discussions here is that, we see these behaviours in children and behaviours of concern in the classroom, and it's not about excusing those behaviours. If a child responds violently or aggressively or in a manner that's just not appropriate, we can't just go, oh, never mind, they've got speech, language and communication needs, that's fine. That, we've still got to address the behaviour. It'd be like me saying, I was get stopped for speeding. Why were you going, 40 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone? Oh, I'm really sorry, I was late. The policeman's not going to go to me, oh, never mind, you were late. Don't worry, it's all fine. He might go, well, that's fine, but you need to slow down. You can't, you can't let your lateness impact on your driving. That's not okay. And it's the same for these children. If I'm speeding because I'm late, we need to look at why I'm late, not at, excusing that behavior. So it is partly looking at that, but also at supporting what the underlying cause is. As if we can address it at that level before things become out of control for that child. Because once you get to a certain point, it's really hard to undo that damage to a child. So if we can put support in early, then that's going to be far more effective. So I'm just going to reshare the PowerPoint if that's okay, and then we can carry on with some strategies. So just bear with me while I get on to the next slide. Is it going to move on? There we go. So some strategies. I'm aware we've only got 10 minutes left. These, you've got a handout in the pack that is, there's a lot of information on that one. So please do have a read through that. Hopefully that one, I don't know if you've already got it or it will come to you afterwards. I'm just put on there about Elklan communication friendly schools. I'm not sure if that's something that you are aware of, but do find out more on the Elklan website if that's something that you're interested in. But looking at how to make your whole communication your whole environment communication friendly can make a massive difference. So do find out more from Elklan. Using visual supports for children, if they are struggling to understand, remember and process longer instructions, how can we help them with that processing? And one of the best ways that we can do that is through using visual support with children. So pictures to support a topic. You know, if you talk about rainforests, child having a picture of a rainforest, it's going to really help them understand what a rainforest is if they can see one. Really simple things like that. Visual timetables for students, especially if they struggle with transitions, moving from one thing to another, knowing what will happen and when it will happen. That will really support students to stay regulated when they know what's going to happen during their day. Symbols are a good way of backing up spoken word with something visual. I don't know if people are familiar with task plans. They're just so where there is a verbal instruction, it's a visual representation of that instruction that children can access. So they've not got to remember all of that information. Just simple things like using gesture, backing up our spoken language with gesture, pointing, facial expressions, all of that side, that non-verbal communication really supports students to understand what we're saying. First and then cards and mind maps are more visual support. I'd love to go into detail on all of these with you. I could be here till 4 o'clock my time, which is what's that for you? 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock your time. I'm not going to keep that long, don't worry. For your understanding spoken language, keep your instructions short. Say one thing at a time. If a child struggles with 2-step instructions, don't give them 2-step instructions. Give them 1-step instruction and say one thing at a time. Use their name to get their attention. If they've lost that focus because they've zoned out because language is becoming a bit overwhelming, just saying their name to get their attention. Something simple as that can call them back and get their focus back on. Giving them time to process, we call it at Elklan the 10-second rule. So children with SLCN need up to 10 seconds to remember that information, process it, understand what's being asked, and then formulate a response. That can be up to 10 seconds. So think of your 10-second rule and repeat key information for them. So say things again, and maybe 2 or 3 times so that they're following that information. Giving instructions in the order that they need to be carried out. So avoiding using things like before and after. So if you say to a child, before you go out to play, you need to hand in your worksheet. That child hears, go out to play first, hand in your worksheet second. So they're going to go out to play first, even though what you want them to do is hand in the worksheet before they go out to play. So be careful of words like before and after. They do alter the order, and then children get in trouble for going out to play without doing what they were asked. Avoid your ambiguous language, your idioms, your sarcasm, your non-literal language, all of those. The jump ups, as I heard in a school last week, you know, those kind of phrases that we'll use all the time, but just be aware with the children that you're working with. Checking understanding, asking the child, tell me what you need to do, is better than saying, do you know what to do? Because they'll probably say yes. And ensuring that child or young person's got a system where they can ask for help. So, you know, it might be really hard for that child. I'm thinking of a child like Alex in that case study, probably doesn't want to put up his hand and go, I don't understand what to do, because he's already feeling quite self-conscious. But if he's got a way that he can indicate that to his teacher, you know, like a red or green card. So if he turns it over, the red card means I need help. Someone can come and support him rather than relying on him to seek that help verbally. I love this instruction. This is one that the second one is one that I encountered with a child, but just thinking about instructions that might cause problems for children. So first one, before your next lesson, write down 3 key things that you've learned in today's lesson. So in that, there are 2 steps. There's a before in it. They've got to remember, they've got to go away and do that. So there is a time between now and the completion. So they've got to remember that information. So that one's really tricky. This second one was one that I heard, and I'll show you the child's response in a moment. So draw 7 boxes of equal size, cut around them, and write the days of the week in the boxes. Now, I don't know about you, but I would struggle to draw 7 boxes of equal size. That's a tricky number to make them equal. Cut around them. You might find a child that cuts around, makes them round rather than cutting them out. And then write the days of the week in the boxes. So this is what the child did. So they wrote the days of the week in the boxes. So this child wasn't wrong. They did what they were asked, but they misunderstood that instruction. They didn't write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They wrote the days of the week in the box, which is what they were asked to do. So sometimes if you give an instruction or say something to children and you don't get the response that you were thinking you would get, then what was it that you said that's caused that confusion? Thinking of questions you might ask children, you might think, oh, it was so-and-so's birthday at the weekend. What did you do for your birthday? And they go, I'm 6. And you think, oh, that's not what I asked you. Maybe the child doesn't understand the what did you do for your birthday, can't retell. Here's the word birthday, thinks everyone's talking about that. I'm 6 now, so that must be what she's asking. Therefore, I'll tell her I'm 6. So always look back at what you've asked a child to do, and is that where is it going wrong for that child? Think about your questions with children. So questions are something that we're really keen to use with children as practitioners. We ask them lots of questions because we want them to show our knowledge and know how much they've understood. But actually thinking about questions, do we need to ask all the questions that we do? What's the purpose of them? Are we actually interested in their answer? Because sometimes we're not, and we ask questions that are just pointless. Do we know that children can understand the questions that we're asking? And how do we know? How can we adapt our questions for different children and their levels? Are we asking questions that are just too hard for children? We do that, we might get a behaviour or a response that we're not expecting. The blank language scheme is a brilliant approach for supporting children to understand questions. That's part of an Elklan course, is looking at the blank language scheme. I haven't got time to explain that to you today, but do go away and look into the blank language scheme. It's a fantastic approach for supporting children's understanding. For your vocabulary, just remember that exposure to those words. Pre-teaching vocab, so helpful, making it real life, making your vocab learning multisensory, using things like word maps, brilliant resource if you know what word maps are. If not, again, have a look, find an Elklan course and find out more. So vocab, lots and lots of strategies that we can be using to help children learn and remember new words. So yeah, again, lots of those strategies, reinforcing those words, providing opportunities for children to use them, and making that learning new words an active process, not a passive process. So getting a child to look up in a dictionary what a word means is not going to help that child remember that word. They need to experience it, use it, feel it, embrace it, try it, see what it is, and that will support them with that retention, and then keep revisiting those new words. You've got a whole handout on supporting children with social communication and interaction, because this is a big area where things can go wrong for children. But looking especially at that non-literal language, your non-verbal communication, and coping with change and the unexpected. I'm not going to say any more on that because there's lots and lots of information in your handout on that. I'm going to miss that one out. But for you, what I'd love you to do as a result of this session is to think about a child or a young person that you know who's got speech, language and communication needs, who may be presenting with behaviours of concern. What is going on with that child? Where is it breaking down for them? And what strategies could you use to support them? And how are you going to share this message with your colleagues so that you are supporting them to see that link between speech, language and communication and behaviour? So just here, key message, observe the behaviour, think, SLCN. So could it be language? Encourage you to think about that. That's what we've covered in the session. I'm going to come back to any questions because I just want to show you, you've got a flyer on the Elklan course that's starting in February. If I've whet your appetite to find out more about strategies, then that would be a brilliant course for you. There's some UK-based resources that you can go away and have a look at, and lots of references at the end for everything that we've talked about today. Okay, and thank you.
Amazing. I think
There we go. Sorry, I kind of galloped through the
Right.
last few
One
slides.
important thing is that someone put, I'm just trying to find it, the thing that we should definitely remember is that teachers need to want to help the child. And I think that's absolutely key. Thank you, Aisha. She also said that in order, they might want to help but not have the strategies, and so therefore us training to point them to the Elklan website, lots of free stuff going on. Point to these webinars, because these webinars really do help to upskill teachers, and they're free of charge. So and then Aisha wrote, what age would you recommend a formal diagnosis is the very young learners? I don't know if you want to take it or if you'd like me to take it.
A diagnosis of what? Speech, language and communication?
And that's the thing, the diagnosis of what. So what I would say in terms of age is irrelevant. I think you've got to look at the child as an individual and see if the barriers are such that if you know what's going on with them, if you can pick it apart, or even if you can attempt to pick it apart to begin with, you might be able to meet the needs with a few images or a few speeches. If it goes on, if you do all of the tools from your own toolkit and the teachers use all of the tools from their own toolkit and the child is still not able to make progress, then it might be worth speaking to a professional and having a screen. And that might be for OT or speech and language or any kind of screener. The screener should then allow you to implement an intervention of some sorts, and you need to try the first intervention for 6 weeks, 8 weeks to see if you can remove that barrier, because sometimes with speech and language it might be literal language like Arabic to English or French. So if a child's barriers can be removed through an intervention, then I would say that's not necessarily a special need. However, if it goes on for 6 weeks to 8 weeks or even longer, and you've seen over time that the child is not able to make that progress, that's the time that you need to go and speak to a specialist. The specialist, again, speech and language, OT, etc., the specialist will then conduct a series of either assessment or support for the child. And again, if the support removes that need, then you don't need a formal diagnosis of a special need. But they could have a speech and language need that can be removed through therapy. Okay, so it's not a clear-cut answer. The answer towards the age is when you need to have answers that you can't work out for yourself. Some of you are specialist heads of inclusion, Senkos. You've got a lot of skills up your sleeve. You might even be a speech and language therapist. If you've got those skills up your sleeve, use them. And then if after time it doesn't work, then you go for that diagnosis of either speech and language need or language, developmental language or autism or ADHD, anything. I think that happens over time, and that can happen at any age. Absolutely any age. The age is not what's important. It's the barrier to learning is the indicator for you. And I really hope that helps you. Are there any resources and articles that can help homeroom teachers? Well, let's signpost them to the YouTube channel, signpost them to Elklan. The Elklan website is elklan.co.uk. If you can't remember that, then go to louisedawson.com/Elklan, and all the Elklan information is on my website as well. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. And with that, I think we are probably done. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate your time given to us, but mostly because this shows that you have a really keen interest in your young people, which is what we love. So again, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to Jill. Really appreciate you giving your time, especially free of charge, and engaging in this really important conversation. Any more information, louisedawson.com/Elklan or elklan.co.uk. We have lots of events coming up. We have tomorrow our Gifted and Talented event. So from 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock here at our centre, we have a free coffee chat, talk about gifted and talented students, learn from each other in the same way that we have done today. If you found today useful, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and connect with me on LinkedIn to stay updated with any future training tools and guidance. I'm hoping to welcome Jill back in a little while. Thank you very much for your time and commitment to supporting children and young people. And with that, I wish you all a very pleasant evening. And if I don't speak to you again, a very, very, very pleasant winter break. Much love to all of your families, regardless of your faiths and beliefs. And Jill, thank you once again. Have a nice evening. Take care.
You're really welcome. Thank you,
And
everyone.
goodbye.